Well, hello, Ian. We are here to do a wrap, a year in review, but it's so good to see you. You're sporting your handlebar mustache. I love it.
Thank you. Thanks for noticing.
I think
Finally,
you're noticing.
I finally grown a mo. I'm 62 and this is my first ever mo.
Is that right? Have you always had trouble?
No, had a goatee for a long time, but
You did
I
have
just
a goatee.
realised I looked like every other white aging male who, it was my version of the red sports car. Actually, maybe this is my red sports car.
Right. Perfect.
I'm
Gives you
happy.
gives you that flirty look, does it?
Well, thank you, ma'am.
Fabulous. All right. Well, we want to talk about the year in the review, but we can't go to the past without just some commentary on what's happening right now, and particularly about the devastating events that have just happened at Bondi Beach, and actually also. I work at the moment for a global client, and they are also rocked by the events that happened at Brown University, which is sort of very, very close proximity to the tragedy at Bondi Beach, and our heartfelt condolences to the families, to anyone who experienced that incident, because many people were there, they were fleeing. It's a terrible incident, and you and I were talking about the fact that it has actually rocked us because of the location too, because you've just written a book about place and the
Place,
importance of place,
meaning
right?
of place. Yeah.
So what does that mean? What does that place mean, and how does that impact our meaning of Bondi Beach?
For me, it's the blast of energy and happiness and hedonism and belonging and diversity and welcome that Bondi represents to me. But I
Always
think,
has, hasn't it? Yeah.
yeah, I didn't get to. I grew up in Perth, and I didn't get to travel to East Coast or over East, as people in Perth say, until
East.
I was in my early 20s. I went to London first and Europe, and Bondi was like, oh my god, I finally arrived at the heart of us. One of the hearts of Australia,
In terms
certainly.
of inclusion, yes, and just
Yeah,
beauty, and yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
And I think it's a sacred place, not only for those of us that live in this country, and I'm hoping First Nations also feel that it's still their place,
Mm.
but also for visitors. I saw Whoopi Goldberg mentioning Bondi on TV, and it was like, yeah, this place has resonance. A little bit like, the World Trade Center represented a
Yes,
global place. So for that terrible thing to happen there with one of the world's most marginalized populations
exactly,
historically, and it only takes two people with access to regular firearms, even in this
exactly.
regulated society.
That's right.
We're all. I guess it's just I feel very vulnerable about that.
Mm-mm.
I was just in Perth swimming at the beach on the weekend, terrified of being eaten by a shark. And in some ways, because climate change is meaning that the sharks are swimming closer to the coast in
Yes,
Perth. But in some ways, the predators are on land as well. And it only
exactly.
takes someone who's tipped over the edge by this crazy zeitgeist we're in,
That's right.
where the everyday discourse is fueled by online rants and
Division.
disinformation and bot farms in Macedonia trolling
Mm.
out horrible divisionary rubbish. This is going to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
And now we have some of Australia's most heinous right-wing white demagogues turning up wearing
Yeah,
their country-style cowboy hats, marginalising yet more people who happen to have been born somewhere else in the world.
exactly. Exactly.
So it just becomes this cauldron of feeding on itself.
Exactly. And people like that, and we're talking about Barnaby Joyce in particular and friends. People like that do stoke that at times like this, when you actually should be really corralling people in and using forces of unity. And obviously this is a very geopolitically, this is, there are many contexts, many layers of context in place here. This is not just about what happened at Bondi. Obviously it goes back to the Israeli and Gaza conflict. However, this is not a time to stoke that division and to use this terrible, terrible tragedy as a launching pad to those goals. It's disgusting. It really is disgusting. Yeah.
You know, before we joined this morning, I quickly went on to ChatGPT, of course, the most authoritative source of evidence that ever existed. But I wanted to find out whether Bondi and its surrounding area had ever been the site of massacres of the Darogan era peoples who are the traditional custodians. And in fact, there have been no documented massacres of Indigenous peoples there, although I think historically we're trying to reckon with the fact that there have been over 400 verified massacres around this continent since colonisation. But to my heartfelt surprise, Bondi Beach has never been one of them. So this is the first documented case.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Because I think having a sense of history is really important. And I've been listening to Rachel Maddow's podcast called Ultra, which is about the history of the ultra-right in the United States. And I mean, in the 90s and 90s, there was this long campaign of Nazi infiltration of the United States political environment, which had incredible consequences, which have never really gone away. And in some ways, the language that we're seeing in the US right now, with America First, and it's all straight out of the 1930s and this playbook. The language and the rhetoric is exactly the same. It's just that this time there's more reach than ever before.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that podcast. I'll look that up because
It's amazing.
Rachel Maddow. I really like her.
Yeah, she's an incredible storyteller. She and her team.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh well, Iain, let's go back. Let's go back to to early. Let's go back and recap the year. And I wanted to firstly just give a shout out to. Just some of the, let's start broad and then we'll go down. I do want to give a shout out to some of the guests I've had on the podcast because it's been amazing, but that's not where I wanted to start. Where I wanted to start was the global context. And if I think about the kind of major forces that we've seen at play this year, we've seen incredible disruption. I think we say that, I think we always say that, but really this year has been off the charts for me anyway, particularly around the geopolitical space driven by what's happening in the US and other major players. We had very early on US cuts to major aid organizations, which we still feel the ripple effect of today. We've had the Israeli-Iran conflict as well. We have a continued war in Ukraine. And it just feels like escalation of some of these conflicts globally throughout 2025 rather than escalation. And then, of course, that has some of the particular US foreign policy around trade, tariffs and other trade policies have meant this incredible slowdown of the global economy and disruptions of supply chains and just incredible disruption that was going to happen anyway because of AI technology and other technologies, but it's just added fuel to the fire. When you look at the global context, and how do you wrap up 2025? And it's kind of hard to put it in a nutshell, I know. I will say too, I think in Australia we've felt some of these forces. So how do you see it?
Maybe a dumpster fire being hit by an asteroid made of sludge. I don't know. During one of my endless kvetches during the year, and this year one of my takeaways is that I have an internal voice that other people have learnt to shut down and not share with the world.
That's why we love you, Iain.
One of my learning outcomes is to dial it down and maybe just switch it off. I don't know. But one of my internal voices that I have probably overshared with my poor suffering partner is that this is possibly the dumbest time to be alive, where we have 100,000 years of science represented by the scientific advances of the last 200 or 300 years. But we have people refusing to get their children vaccinated who are then dying of measles.
Yes.
We have climate science being discounted and shut down. We have history being closed down. And so we're at risk of... reframed, but history and the things that are taught at universities to create a good society where people have got critical thinking skills and want to interrogate ideas and have decent conversations,
Yes.
that is being shut down because it's seen as not being productive to quote unquote the economy.
Yeah.
But we don't just want job-ready graduates. We want thinking citizens that have a deep point of view and are willing to engage in reflective discourse, which I try to do as much as I can. So for me, it's just like, what? Currently in the States, degrees such as social work and teaching and nursing are being reclassified as not professional degrees. Why? So I suppose I'm just incredulous because everything that I thought I knew about growing up from 1963 onwards has kind of been thrown out of the window. So it's at an ontological, existential level, it's very shocking to see how fragile our society is and how things can turn on a dime.
Absolutely. Very fragile.
And
exactly.
It's like there's this mania going on where people who don't have the luxury of having time to think, or maybe their news sources have been corralled into the Rupert Murdoch holding pen.
Latter. I think it's more the latter.
And I mean, I studied sociology as part of my psychology training, and I learnt about false consciousness and some of the principles that, socialist thinkers were putting out through Marx and Engels and all of those folks. And those people had something important to share because it's happening in front of our faces right now.
Exactly.
But, at the moment, anything that's left of far right is positioned as far left when in fact it's not. And in public health, population health, health promotion, my field, here in Victoria, Australia, we have the Victorian state government deciding to shut down the Victorian Health Promotion Foundation, Vic Health, which has been possibly the world's most successful health promotion organisation.
And when was that decided?
In the last week. They decided that it can be ingested into the belly of the health department. And when you look at basic health promotion and community development, you always need an independent, community-driven, independent thinking organisation that does some of the deep thinking work that governments can't do. There's 50, 60, 70, 80 or more years of modern social theory that talks about the need for a system to have ginger groups in them to have an independent line of thought and to bubble up community-driven stuff from the ground that governments can't do.
Exactly.
Vic Health pioneered the world's first sort of concerted attempt to reduce taco influence in sport.
Exactly. Incredible research was done by Vic Health, as well as many...
You and I have done work with them.
Exactly.
We ran our Healthy Cities and Communities short course there, you and I, 20 years ago, with Professor Len Dool, the man that co-established the Healthy Cities program with WHO. Vic Health have led and triggered incredibly valuable research and action and advocacy. And for the government of the day to decide that it can just be swallowed up into the belly of a frankly hollowed out health department, there's nothing left in there.
And the other thing about agencies like Vic Health, definitely it's the independence, but it's also the longer term thinking and strategic thinking that you can do, whereas government departments are often a bit hamstrung, or very hamstrung by their ministerial priorities, which are short term. So it's that as well. And we know that preventative health requires a longer term view. So
an ounce of prevention is worth, an ounce of prevention's worth 600 tons of cure, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think I just mixed up my measurements there. I should have said a milligram of prevention. I'm hoping that decision will be overturned, and if people want to search on LinkedIn for discussion around Vic Health, former health ministers have weighed in, former CEOs of Vic Health have weighed in, former board chairs have weighed in, learned and very visible advocates have weighed in. It's a disastrous decision that lacks any form of theoretical or evidence-based grounding. And I guess this goes back to my early discussion about the asteroid hitting the dumpster fire. It's like, where's the science in this? Where's the evidence?
Yes.
Where's the theory?
Mm-mm.
I don't know. It's crazy.
Yeah, exactly, Ian. And so we have a year where maybe we are feeling dumber than ever, or we are demonstrating that we are dumber than ever in an environment where we have access to information. And when you think about particularly the use of AI particularly through artificial intelligence, agentic AI through ChatGPT, we can see that people have more access to information, but it's what kind of information and how is that funneled through social media and other media outlets as well. So, and in some ways, and you know, we know particularly in psychology and social psychology that you can overlay technology on systems, but if those systems have a fundamental bias, then the technology will be driven through bias. So it's not a solve for that. We have to ensure that we maintain that critical thinking. So Iain, okay, so let's go back to your personal year then. Let's look at what we've personally been involved in and what we've looked at. And I wanted to cover just some of the conversations that we've had on this platform, on this podcast. You and I have talked a lot about disinformation. We talked about cultural psychology. We've talked about navigating professional identity. We did a podcast on can LinkedIn handle our, POV, our position. So when times get tough, how do we handle that professional identity? We've talked about well-being and growth. We had an incredible conversation that led to a paper being authored. So do you want to just recap that? Because I think that for me is a highlight of the year.
I've written that down too. And a huge shout out to our new BFF, Javier Omar Melendez Vega, who is this
Hi, Javier.
young thinker that I happened to find online when I was searching for my interest in nature and place and healing and psychological wellness. And Javier's been pioneering some work in the United States that he's created himself as a clinical social worker about therapeutic benefits of reconnecting clients to place and historical and cultural and ancestral lands, if you like. And I reached out to him. It's one of those great stories of where the internet is a force for good and creating community.
Exactly.
You and I, being the entrepreneurs and shameless hucksters that we are, we reached out to him and invited Javier to be on our podcast, which he did. And he was very nervous because it was his first one. And of course, we said to him, relax. You're amongst friends. Thanks for ironing that shirt, but you didn't need to, And that led to an opportunity for us to write together.
Exactly.
And Javier had mentioned that he had a dream of writing, and his own blog was I was very taken and impressed by it, which is why I wrote to him, because his writing was spectacular. Mm. And then the goddess told us that the American Journal of Community Psychology was looking for papers on this very topic.
Yeah.
Of decolonization and the health benefits of place and ancestral reconnections. And Javier led that journal paper, which has been accepted.
That's right. And it was such a great blend of our, I loved working with the two of you on that. It was a blend of our experience and different lenses that we bring to that. So it was such a beautiful process. And I think it's being published early next year. Am I right, Iain?
Yeah. And I guess what I also realised was my Gen X DNA has reached the end of its usefulness. I mean, Javier is using AI and modern research tools and apps in a way that it just completely blew me away. I still don't know exactly what he did, but he did create some magic, and his voice is there throughout. It's his work, but he used some of the modern tools to help him
synthesize the research.
Absolutely.
And mine the research, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I was a bit in awe watching him do that too. So
I know.
Fantastic.
I hope I made some sort of contribution to the paper.
You did.
Because I felt like the wizard's assistant, really, But you brought in the organisational lens, and I guess I brought in some community psych Well, I
Exactly.
did. But Javier brought in his practice knowledge and experience as a therapist and
Yes.
as someone exploring their own connections to their own indigeneity and diverse communities, I guess, which was really amazing. And also Javier's at the front line of this current Trump administration, for want of a better term, you
Mm.
know, picking people up off the streets in San Antonio where Javier and his partner live. I mean, it all just felt very bizarre and,
Yeah.
you know, anyway, I'm now prodding Javier to go and turn this into his doctorate because he's already done most
Yeah.
of the
He
research.
should definitely do that. He should definitely
Mm.
do that. So we
Mm-hmm.
will, when the paper is published, we'll get Javier back in
Mm.
the new year and get him to, we'll have another
Absolutely.
chat. Be fabulous. And
Yeah.
I loved the use of medicine stories to,
Yes.
so you know, in organizational psychology, in organizational behavior, we often use case studies, but instead we've used medicine stories to display and
Yeah.
demonstrate the concepts in an applied sense. Yeah, we'll definitely get
Mm.
him back on to talk about that. That it'd be wonderful.
I think my other reflection of that process was realizing that it's a whole new wave of psychological thinking and practice across the social sciences, really, which I'm currently sort of managing to keep up with because I'm in the slipstream. But I think Javier's generation, they're creating a whole new discourse that I and you to some extent are new to. And
Yes.
it feels a little overwhelming because the language is a little different.
Mm,
But it's really great to be part of it, and I hope it
exactly.
shows that my brain is still plastic enough to
Yeah.
absorb new ideas.
Exactly, and that's what I love too. It's the rethinking some of the ways in which we've been thinking about our sense of self and place, and particularly our the juxtapositioning of our identity and our Indigenous brothers and sisters, and
Mm,
how we can translate that wisdom. Yeah, so all of that, and thinking about inclusion in a different way as well. So yeah, fabulous.
shall I keep? Actually, let's go back to you because I've just talked for a bit. You go. What was your next highlight?
So I actually was very concerned about the trends that I was seeing in technology and AI. So from a technology perspective, very concerned about the, you know, six or seven major companies in the US who drive the global share market have who are making decisions about our future in AI technologies, and their adoption and their application, and also at the same time just concerned about some of the priorities related to their sense of how to commercialize that and how to monetize that. So, for example, the inclusion of relationship agents in the meta universe in OpenAI's ChatGPT, which then led to some tragic circumstances. You know, few people, but tragic circumstances, but also maybe a generation who will use that to form relationships, their most significant relationships with kind of fake online people rather than real people in the real world, and what that does to our early development, particularly for young people, healthy development into adulthood. You know, what are the consequences of that? So I was very concerned about that. I was really, in some ways, pleased to see the Albanese government take a stand, maintain the stand around at least the access to social media and to minors, even though I'm sure that we will see that that's, you know, those companies again with their power and reach will find ways just to, you know, avoid that kind of regulation. But nevertheless, to be able to see a government attempt to regulate that the onslaught, I think is a really good first step, and we need to continue to critically challenge the use of technology in that way and the impact. If those companies are causing harm at a social level, they need to be held accountable for that, and we need to be able to regulate that. So I thought that was really good. And then from a workplace perspective, just the inclusion of strategic thinking about AI, scaling AI in organizations. And I can just speak for organisations in Australia, but I can see that we are still grappling with how to leverage AI in organisations, in the work that organisations do. But it is a hot topic of conversations. Customers expect service type organisations to have AI in their processes because they expect that efficiency and that speed to decision that AI gives you. So customers and consumers understand what's possible, and so they're expecting that from business to deliver that. So I feel like we're still at the stage where we have some good ideas, but we're getting some progress, but there's a long way to go. We have not nailed this at all. But so in some ways for me, technology, I've been appalled and worried, and at the same time still optimistic about what we can do in relation to bringing technology to the workforce in a way that doesn't diminish the workforce. And this is the problem. In some ways, we saw some interesting case studies. So we had a major bank in Australia that rolled out AI in their call centre space this year. So they immediately cut headcount. They thought, we don't need the actual real operators. We don't need the customer service consultants. But what they found was that because of their chatbots, customers were able to manage their easy problems with the chatbot, but then got to a level of complexity where they need to speak to a real person, and they still need those people in that customer service area. So they had to renege on that and really wind that back and bring those people back. And so we can't assume that the inclusion of AI means that we can cut our headcount. What the inclusion of AI does is makes the low-hanging fruit easy to do, but then what we do then have is an increase of demand for solving more complex problems, which is sort of where we want to go. For me, that's a good outcome, but you need people to solve those more complex problems right now because we are not there with the technology. Those companies, is hyperbolizing a word? It should be.
It is now.
It is now. They are hyperbolizing about what they can do. Most of it is science fiction right now, because even when we say that AI is intelligent, it's not intelligent in the way that we think of intelligence. It's intelligent in the way that you would think of someone who has incredible memory and can access data really quickly, but they don't have any EQ skills. They don't know how to really understand a problem in the way that we understand a problem unless you literally spell it out to them. It's those people that are really annoying when you speak to them in the real world, And so that's kind of where we are with AI. And I know it'll get better, and there will be, and it's exponential the way that that technology is improving, but it doesn't mean that we necessarily can cut the workforce. What I'm hoping for is that many organisations see how they can optimise in this space, and they shift their workforce to higher order capabilities. So then you're leveraging, you're optimizing the actual real person and their skills. And yes, there will be some people obviously that are caught up in that mill, because if you're doing a job that can be automated, it probably is most likely to be automated if it hasn't been already. So I see highs and lows in that.
I mean, I was reading about the knowledge economy, the boom of the knowledge industry 20 years ago, and what you've described is exactly what was said was needed. So, I mean, who would have ever thought that by firing all your workers and replacing them with the AI equivalent of a chimpanzee, that we'd actually need people that can synthesize and interpret and dig deeper into the complex nature of systemic issues? I mean, who would have thought?
Yeah.
Said no one ever.
I know. They should have just asked us, Ian.
Yeah, you mentioned the federal Australian Labor government, aka the Albanese government, cutting off access to social media for people under 16. I made a pithy comment with one of my inner voices online the other day, saying, "Well, what we really need is white people who are 70 getting the Facebook rantings of Barnaby Joyce and Pauline Hanson and the far right demagogues who are watching, they're all watching Sky News. What about that sort of access to misinformation and emotional harm? Where do you stop?
Well, that's true, but I think social media is a level up because of the algorithm that then puts things into your feed. So you can choose to switch a channel, and we know that there are certain channels, certain digital channels on television that have a particular bias, but nobody's putting that into your phone. Well, maybe it is if you watch it on your phone, but the phone algorithm is the problem because
Yeah.
once you have a certain set of preferences that are known, you get the algorithm. And for younger people who absolutely, have habits around phone use, their phone becomes the source of
An
all
extension
truth.
of their...
Yeah,
I guess...
and an extension of their identity as well, right? So, yeah.
Part of my point was that older people are using Facebook as their primary social media group. And, Zuckerberg has stripped out so much of the protections for any age cohort.
Well, there's that, yeah, exactly. That's true. And we know that, I was looking at the statistics in Australia, there's billions of dollars being scammed from our elderly people. I find that's really tragic. And I have an 80-year-old mother. I get it. She's been listening to me, so she's petrified. Even when I send her a link, she won't press it, But then sometimes I have to go in and remove some things from her phone. And she feels the onslaught of that. So yes, unfortunately, you have that technology, of course, leading to harm as well. And again, if we were able to do it in some ways, it's very similar. I see this very similar to the tobacco industry, particularly in Australia. We were able to regulate, but it took a long time, and it took many, many years of advocacy around that, and great work by Big Health too. But it took, many, many years of advocacy, and I think that's what we've got to do. We've got to lean in rather than be dismayed, lean in and keep advocating for the kinds of, the awareness around some of these harms. And I'm not in the research space around this, but I'm sure that there is research being done as well that we can still point to. But it's an advocacy issue, and we know that there are powerful forces at play here. You've got you've got companies that are valued at trillions of dollars. It's crazy, right? You've got anti-competitiveness in that space.
Whilst I was in Perth, I was greeted at the Perth Airport Arrivals Lounge with an electronic billboard celebrating Gina Rinehart's sponsorship of an Olympic team. Down at the beach, the local kids' surf lifesaving club was sponsored by Woodside Petroleum. And we've just had Bill Gates online saying some incredibly dumb things about why are we investing all of this work in climate? We should be investing in health. And it's like, what do you not understand about the link between climate and health? I mean, WHO and all of the international research community have been doing this work for 40, 50 years. This goes back to the thing about dumb and the work of Vic Health. Like, why has the discourse pivoted to a few tech oligarch bros who don't have a background in climate science or health, who are creating such disinformation about the link between upstream prevention and downstream consequences? And just seeing that sponsorship in Perth of the fossil industry's integration into everyday life, it's like the tobacco sponsorship pre-Vic Health. And here we are again. It just doesn't stop. Can I quickly pivot to some fun stuff instead of my usual rant?
Yes, because we do need to go to that before we go out. I do want to hear more about what you've been consuming.
Yes.
Let's go there.
Well, do you remember we did a podcast with a wonderful guest a couple of years ago about the third act and the importance of... with Catherine. I'm sorry for Catherine. At this point, I cannot recall your last name, and I sincerely apologise. But Catherine's a placemaker, and we're still in touch. And she's done some really great work with the laneways of Melbourne, which international visitors now visit and take photos of, because it's all about urban greening, creating community spaces. I guess what this year has meant for me is my own third act, and the work we've done with Javier Melendez Vega is part of my own quest. It seems to be that the book, which is about the psychology of place and has involved some amazing First Nations writers and thought leaders and discourse around decolonization and what it means, I've realized that my own trajectory this year has been about my own decolonization. You know, part of what the American Journal of Community Psychology through Javier required you and I to do is to position ourselves in terms of where we sit as white people in our own journey. And the book that I have had the incredible good fortune to curate and be lead editor and lead author on, I started that with my own journey as a white migrant to Perth in the 1960s. It's only right through writing that book that I've learnt that the First Nations name, the Noongar name for Perth is Boorloo. And why did it take me that long? And I started reading about the history of colonisation in Western Australia in a way I'd never done before, and learning that in 100 years ago, or slightly longer, there was a department in WA called the Department of Fisheries and Aborigines or something. It's like, really? You know, like, there's so much history that we settler colonial people, and I say we, you and I and others.
Yeah.
It's incredibly important that we read this and understand. And for me, one of the great joys of this year has been my consulting work that I did with Yaru consultant Mandy Gadsden and my brother James led to a partnership with the Nalama Yindabandi Foundation up in Irumurgadu or Roebourne in the Pilbara, who gave consent for me not only to base the key concluding chapter on their work to position livability at the core of their strategic planning work for social justice, but they gave me permission to speak about it at a conference on livability in Germany in October. And it's just been, my God, it's just been so fulfilling because, you know, the little logo on my business ID is a Mobius strip, a little triangle that where learning and practice and research intertwine with each other and never end. And I sort of feel like this year for me has been this opportunity to actually experience that at a very deep level for myself and for the communities that I've worked with over the years. It's been unbelievably fulfilling, and I'm so insanely grateful.
When is your book out? Let's
next June. At the moment, I'm because you and I tend to throw big ideas out there and see what lands. My dream is to have a big launch in Melbourne. Where writers from the book have an opportunity to have a symposium. Right. We'll probably do it through the Australian Fulbright Alumni Association because a few alumni are involved. But also I want to do one up in Irumurgadu in the city of Karratha where Roebourne is situated. You know, the city of Karratha, its vision statement is to be Australia's most livable regional city. And yet, if you look at their documentation, which I've posted about on LinkedIn, their strategic plan, it presents a fairly white image of Karratha, and half an hour's drive from Karratha is Irumurgadu, where people are living in some of the most unbelievably heinous conditions.
It doesn't make sense,
as a consequence of intergenerational trauma and dispossession. So this book is actually leading to an opportunity to do some really deep partnership work to support the city of Karratha to actually embrace livability from a two-way lens, Indigenous, what it means for First Nations as well as settler colonial people. And so we're thinking about doing a launch up there as well. I would love that so much.
Can I come?
And I've also made a pitch for the next International Making Cities Livable Conference, which will be held in Latvia, possibly next August. My dream is to have a third launch there and invite First Nations authors from the book and others that have contributed to. What I learned was, for all this work around livability, a lot of mainstream livability practitioners, and I mean mainstream not in a disparaging way, but just everyday folks, haven't had a chance to look at the links between place, health and livability, which has been my thing for quite a while. So watch this space. I'm ready to pull out all the stops.
Amazing. And so while you've been writing your book this year, have you had time to read any books?
Apart from scrolling. Yes, I have, actually.
Yeah, what have you read this year?
A dear friend of mine in England, Audrey Cartwright, sent me this book called The Hermit.
it's a beautiful cover.
It's a first-person's memoir of a woman in England that entered a period of mental distress, and her solace and her healing was to take herself to a remote island off the Cornish coast in England and live on this island for quite a while with her partner and rediscover the healing benefit of everyday contact with nature and the power of solitude. It was one of the most beautiful books I've read.
What's the author?
Her name is Jade Angeles Fitton.
Beautiful. Oh, yes. Okay. Might have to get that one.
A beautiful read.
Okay, but I'm going to go through a list, and then I'll tell you mine as well. So, movies, TV. What's
God,
sparked
I've
your
just
interest?
binged The Pit, which is about Pittsburgh hospital emergency.
I wouldn't think that's you, Ian. What do you like about
Well,
that?
my partner Michael found it on the plane going to Perth just last Thursday, and he binged 5 episodes on the way to Perth, 5 coming back, and I just took out yet another streaming subscription to watch it. And
Is it reality show or is it drama?
No, it's drama, but it's all 15 episodes are one day in the life of an emergency team at a public hospital.
Just one day. Amazing.
Struggling with funding cuts and pressures and insurance in America. An extraordinary show.
Okay.
And the post-traumatic stress that can accompany. I can't recommend it high enough, but I'm basically a sci-fi geek.
Well, me too.
I've watched Paradise, which is yet another post-apocalyptic. Have you noticed how many post-apocalyptic shows there are on TV right now?
Yeah.
It's such a thing.
It's a thing.
And I'm here for it. I just started watching another one last night called Pluribus, which is #1 streaming on Apple.
I've just started watching that too. Cara Swisher gave me that recommendation. I thought, I haven't watched that one. It's fabulous. I love it. I love the main character. She's so sassy and fiery and angry.
Episode 1, my goodness.
Yeah, I loved it.
So it's in the discourse. And the other thing about The Pit is emergency and the endless triaging of terrible things is in the discourse too. The discourse seems to be catastrophe.
Right.
It's there. It's been there for a long time. I mean, I watched Earthquake in 1975. I was into disaster movies as a kid.
You know what? I was in an elevator the other day with some younger people, and the elevator wasn't really going as fast as perhaps we weren't seeing progress. And someone mentioned something about the elevator, and I said, you know what? We trust these things way too much than we should. I grew up with skyscraper disaster movies, Towering Inferno. And they just had this blank look. I said, go and watch it. It really aged me. Because remember those Towering Inferno?
Yeah, of course I do.
Oh, my God.
Earth. And There's Got to Be a Morning After, the Poseidon Adventure. All of those
Poseidon
songs.
Adventure. That's right.
Maureen McGovern.
Yeah, exactly.
Last night, during my late night scrolling, as you do on YouTube, I happened to discover 2 dudes in their 30s, white dudes who were manspreading whilst watching Madonna's video for Vogue for the first time. And I just thought, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah, yes.
They were impressed, by the way.
Good. I'm still impressed by Mads. All right, so now let's have a look at, over to me. Books that I have looked at. I made a list. Just a second. Okay. So there are some books that I'm going to say I read, but some of them are audiobooks, which I've just got into this year. And
yes,
I'm finding audiobooks are actually pretty good for my brain. I find the process of listening to an audiobook is somewhat similar to reading it on, in front of me, in that triggers the imagination in the same way, the visualization, the thoughtfulness around certain words. So, I might be listening to something on an audiobook, and if the author says something that's poignant, I'll go back and read, which is what I do when I'm reading a book. If the author has quite a poignant statement or the sentence really means something, I might go back and reread it for understanding and memory. So I was a bit skeptical about audiobooks, but this year I've tried them, and now I'm actually sending them to my nieces and nephews who do not read at all, in the hope that they will start to love books as well. So the books that I've consumed, whether I've read them or through audio, I actually thought I thought about it. I thought I hadn't read much this year, but I've actually done a good job. I thought I'm halfway through Notes on Being a Man by Scott Galloway, who I'm finding very interesting. I read *Sapiens* by Yuval Noah Harari. I started in 2024, so read *Sapiens*. I read *Odysseus* by Stephen Fry, which I absolutely love. I actually listened to the audiobook. It's the story of Odysseus, who's a Greek hero, and it's after the Trojan Wars, and I think it took him 15 years to get back home to his homeland, and it's sort of trials and tribulations of that odyssey back home. And Stephen Fry is the narrator of the audiobook, and he is just, fabulous.
Sorry, I thought Stephen Fry had written his own memoirs called Odysseus. That sounded so dumb when I said, what's the book about?
No, it's Stephen Fry who wrote
narrating.
Odysseus. So but he actually wrote the book. So it's his version of Homer's story. Because Stephen Fry has done a series on Greek mythology. So he's quite well read in Greek mythology. Yeah, so it's his take on it. And so through the book, he might refer back to some other things. So it's definitely, he's not just narrating it as a narrator to someone else. So it's definitely Stephen Fry, which is fabulous. And it's got his wit in it and his take on his perspective on the story. So, and then I've also gone back to a very famous author, Edith Wharton, to reread The Age of Innocence, which I absolutely love. And I did that, Iain, because I felt like I needed to slow down my world with so much disruption and chaos coming at me around, some of the crazy things happening in the geopolitical space and sometimes in the local space. I needed something that helps me to slow down my breath. And Age of Innocence helps me to slow down my breath. It's such beautiful storytelling, and it's the minutiae of the characters' lives, and I love it. I love the film with Daniel Day-Lewis as well. I haven't finished, but I started Making It So by Patrick Stewart. I'm halfway through. And some other memoirs which are on my bucket list for next year to get through is Jacinda Ardern's A Different Kind of Power, because she talks about compassionate leadership, and I'd love to hear her take on that. And then obviously the Obamas, Barack's memoir and Michelle Obama's take on her life as well. And the other one that I did get through just to read for fun was Dead Zone by Stephen King. So when I was a child, I loved Stephen King. I used to read Stephen King a lot, and it's always really clever. And Dead Zone, he wrote in the 70s, and one of the characters in Dead Zone is a politician who makes it up the rank to become the senator. Absolutely corrupt, absolutely Machiavellian, very much Trump. And Stephen King wrote that in the 70s, so if you want to kind of have a bit of fun with that, it's a really interesting book, but also has this character, which is your epitome of your corrupt, evil politician. Just fabulous. So I've had fun this year getting through, because one of my goals at the start of the year was to read more. So I'm going to take that into 2026. I think, we consume a lot of information, but reading, and, now that I've discovered audiobooks, is just a beautiful way to enter into a world. And I find that just the way it helps me think about my own sort of perspectives and beliefs, or challenges some of them, or sometimes confirms some of them. It's such a beautiful thing to do. And it's one of those things that's very mindful for me. It's mindful practice for me. So hopefully I'll get to the end of 26 with some more books.
I guess for me, I've been using podcasts in a way I haven't before. I've really loved listening to historical ones. The Rest is History, You're Dead to Me, some of these other ones, as well as history of pop music, the Hit Parade, I think it is.
Yes.
Just great things.
Fabulous.
Just recently, one of the guys from the Rest is History teamed up with Conan O'Brien to do a 2-part episode on the Beatles as the historical impact of the Beatles. And I'm all things Beatles. The first records we ever got when we arrived in Australia in 1967 were our neighbours' old Beatles singles. So they go right into my DNA.
What do you love about the Beatles? Why is it the Beatles for you?
For me, the Beatles represent what can happen when you have a total synergy of kismet, the right people in the right place at the right time who have gone through the right experiences.
Mm-hmm.
The way they exploded in post-war Britain and post-Kennedy USA, like
Mm-hmm.
they arrived at JFK in February 1964, just 3 or 4 months after Kennedy's assassination, and if they'd come any earlier, they wouldn't have had the impact they'd had. But people were hungry for something positive. They did all that training in Hamburg, which I learnt through the podcast was a site of resistance against Nazism and fascism. It was always a place where young people were listening to jazz and black music and soul. I didn't know that until I listened to the podcast. So the Beatles kind of fitted right in.
Yeah.
And drew on the counterculture that somehow Hamburg citizens managed to maintain during the Third Reich. I had no idea.
Interesting.
And when they arrived back in the UK, they had honed their craft and were ready to explode. You know, they had there's just something magical about the impact they had and the music. And, John Lennon had an incredibly traumatic childhood. And I think now with the hindsight that we have about the impact of childhood trauma on PTSD and how it shapes our world, he was a very troubled man. And his relationship with Yoko Ono was there was something incredibly Freudian and Oedipal about it because
that's right.
He didn't have a proper mother, and Paul McCartney grew up in a family of musicians who drew on that music hall tradition, and they had that class consciousness. They never traded their working class northern roots for anything. They kept it right through. And the coda for the podcast was they broke up in 1969. They were the 1960s.
Yeah.
They started and finished within that decade.
Interesting.
And I know.
I thought they went into the 70s. That's interesting.
No.
But wasn't the 70s amazing for music as well? You know,
yeah.
I'm gonna sound really old when I say this, but I was thinking about this the other day. I'm thinking, where is the new music revolution? There is nothing going on in music that feels revolutionary to me. But maybe I'm not in. Maybe I'm not in the crowd.
I think you and I have to be very careful. I feel like I'm wading into very risky territory here. You know me, with my ranting about vocal fry and people doing that baby doll whispering through their songs. I can't bear it. Just give me a 1970s Philadelphia disco soul track. I'm happy.
But I'm looking at what my young niece and nephews are listening to, and it's all 70s music, Ian. That's what I mean. You know, they are not tapped into anything that is new around music. It's all nostalgia. I'm
kind of heartened by that because they're listening to, and this is me being the curmudgeon, real songs with melodies,
exactly.
lyrics.
Glam rock.
Oh my God, yes. People that didn't auto-tune the very living existence out of their voices. I have to be honest, last night, during one of my this is my YouTube rabbit hole, I watched people in their 20s listening to Karen Carpenter sing Superstar for the first time. I lost an hour of my life watching young people being blown away by Karen. And I grew up on Karen.
I mean, Karen Carpenter, really. I mean, that's,
she was a stranded angel.
Goddess.
And again, it's going back to time and place and history and circumstance.
Yeah.
I love her, and then after a while I get so desperately sad that I have to stop because this young woman had a voice from the gods. She was a musical genius. She was an incredible drummer. Her voice was entirely natural. She had a voice from the goddess. Her brother Richard was a musical genius as well. but they were from a ghastly family
Yeah.
where
And,
Karen was
sometimes
never good enough.
That's right.
And they were touring in the 70s where, for a young woman, she couldn't have lovers on the road. Her touring group, the boys in the band all had their share of girlfriends travelling with them, but she was alone and she was lonely. And I just wanted to give her a hug and comfort her and look after her. I think she elicits this response in so many people. Anyway, that was last night.
I'm going to go back and listen to Karen Carpenter. I need to do that. So
Listen
Iain,
to
just
Superstar.
All right. Superstar. Just wanted to wrap up. I said I'd give my guests of the podcast this year a bit of a shout out, and I had some incredible guests. I interviewed Quinley O'Shea, who is female tech entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, doing her thing. All respect to her. Had really great conversations with some real creative thought leaders, authors. So Dawn Mahan, who's written a great book on project management, which looks at animal avatars in project management. Great stuff. Julie Cockrell, who does a lot of coaching on neurodivergence. We talked about neurodivergence and inclusivity. And Pam McElvain, who's doing great work in diversity, equity and inclusion in the US, really corralling and supporting practitioners at a time where really DEI practitioners are being slammed with the forces that in some ways they expect, because they have always worked in the margins, but really this year has been very tough on DEI practitioners. I spoke to incredible leaders who have had rich careers in their own organisation. So Noel Massey, who was the former vice president at UPS, and Karen Holliday, who was again a former senior executive at the US Postal Service. Real leadership lessons from them. And also spoke to some young entrepreneurs doing their thing, Nahed Karala and Jamie Kritharis, who are young tech entrepreneurs in Australia, really doing great in that media space and marketing space. And also had really wonderful conversations with people like Donald Barclay and Greg Nutter on organisational psychology, coaching and sales. And my standout was Topa Tyler, who's an ex-children's executive producer. He produced a lot of really famous children's TV in the States and was talking to me about his PhD on quantum mechanics and trying to get science behind what we think is going on around positive intention. So really, really interesting conversations. Thank you to all the guests, and just had really lucky moments this year to snapple some of these conversations. There'll be some other conversations in the new year too. And also I wanted to thank you, Iain, because I always love our conversations. They always fill me with so much joy. I hope that others are getting the same as well. And I wanted to summarize what I think our conversations do for me, and it really helps me find meaning, resilience, and humanity in the middle of chaos and disruption. So you are my safe place to fall around those things. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you mean I'm not just some whiny, complaining, middle-aged old bag that's sort of...
not at all.
Thank you. That's why I like you as my friend. Hey, before we go, I finally found... I was looking on my phone for Catherine McPherson's name, but I didn't find Catherine it until McPherson. Just now. Yeah. Catherine. A big shout out to Catherine, who led the transformation of Guildford Lane.
That's
Catherine inspired me this year. Thank you, Catherine.
That's the one. Fabulous. All right. So, Iain, with that, we'll have to go because we're way over time. Thank you so much. Looking forward to some incredible conversations in the new year, and have a wonderful, safe break.
I'm off to buy a new hamster wheel for 2026. My 2025 hamster wheel. It's the one I've been doing that on for 12 months. Like a crazy, demented rodent.
Okay.
It's on fire.
The virtual hamster wheel. Okay. We need a new hamster wheel.
We need a new hamster wheel.
Okay. Thank you, my darling. We will see you in the new year, if not
Ciao,
before.
Bella.
Ciao.
Bye.
See you soon.